She waited through every winter, but when he returned, his coat was full of silence and a promise that no longer belonged to her. Hande had never planned to return to Istanbul, not after the way she was pushed out of Kerem's world, carrying more than just heartbreak inside her, carrying a child, a memory, a truth no one believed she had the right to keep. But destiny is a cruel playwright. Now, 20 years later, she walks back into the city with a daughter by her side, a teenage girl who has Kerem's eyes but no idea who her father really is. And she's not here to rekindle a love story. She's here because Lara, her daughter, is dying, and the only one who can save her is the man she once loved more than life. Kerem Demirhan is not the same man she left behind. He's colder now, powerful, sharp-edged, known in business circles as a storm in a suit. His heart is locked somewhere beneath marble walls and years of silence. When he sees Hande again, everything he buried threatens to rise. But he doesn't ask why she left. He doesn't ask about the child. He simply looks through her, as if she's a memory he'd rather forget than relive. But Lara is a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. In their first encounter, Kerem offers her money coldly, as if that's what her return was about. But when Lara faints in front of him during the conversation, his entire world shifts, because the doctor says something Kerem wasn't ready to hear. She's your biological match. She could be your daughter. And just like that, the ground beneath his arrogance cracks open. The truth Hande had tried to protect for so long begins to bleed into the present, not through words, but through a heartbeat that matches his. It didn't ask if she was his, but fate had already answered. She called him Dad only once, but the silence that followed hurt more than the truth she never knew. Lara is awake now. The hospital lights are soft, but her eyes are full of questions. She's been told this man Kerem might be her father, but no one has confirmed it. Not her mother, not him, just the look in their eyes when they think she's not watching. Hande stands by the window, quiet, still holding on to the weight of a name she chose not to give her daughter, not out of cruelty, out of fear. Fear that Kerem would reject her. Fear that Lara would grow up chasing someone who never looked back. Kerem, meanwhile, stands in the hallway with clenched fists. The doctor's words echo louder than his own. Thoughts, she's your biological match. You're her only chance. But how could he be a father to someone he never knew existed? He wants to ask why. Why Hande never told him. Why she disappeared. Why this girl, who smiles just like him, had to grow up without a name, without answers. But instead, he walks into the room. Lara looks up. "Are you my dad?" she asks. Blunt and innocent. Silence. Hande closes her eyes. Her heart stops. Kerem swallows hard, looks at her, then at the girl. "I don't know yet," he says softly. Lara looks away. "I already do." That night, Hande finds Kerem outside the hospital, standing in the rain. "You should have told me. Would you have stayed? Yes, no. You would have run faster. They're both right, and both wrong. That's the tragedy of them." Kerem watches Lara sleep through the glass. "She has my stubborn eyes, and my lonely heart," Hande whispers. He didn't hold her hand, but her questions still held his soul. He gave her life without knowing it. Now she looked at him like a question no one dared to answer. Kerem started visiting more often, not because he had answers, but because Lara had become a question he couldn't ignore. She was gentle, quiet, too mature for her age. She never asked again if he was her father. But every time he walked in the room, her eyes searched for something, more than medicine. They searched for a place to belong. Hande watched all of it unfold with cautious silence. She wanted Kerem to stay, for Lara, but she also feared what staying could awaken in her old wounds, buried feelings. Love she never stopped carrying. Kerem tried to bond. He brought books, little gifts, tried to make Lara laugh. Sometimes she did. Other times, she stared at the window for hours, as if waiting for someone else. "She doesn't trust me," he said to Hande one evening. "She doesn't know how," Hande replied. "And you?" "I forgot how a long time ago." One night, while going through Lara's medical papers, Kerem noticed something strange. Blood type, DNA markers. It didn't match fully. Something was off. He brought it up gently to Hande. She froze, then looked down. "There's something I need to tell you." "Say it." "There's another possible match. Someone else who could be the donor. Someone who also might be her father. Kerem stared at her like a storm about to break. Who? She whispered the name, Emir. Kerem took a step back, as if the ground under his feet no longer belonged to him. Emir, his own brother, the man he hadn't spoken to in 10 years. He laughed, not from joy, from disbelief. So you didn't just leave me, you ran straight to him. Hande's voice cracked. I didn't choose him. I survived with him. That's not the same. Kerem couldn't breathe. He walked out, not knowing if he was running from the truth or from himself. Meanwhile, Lara slept peacefully, unaware that the man calling her my girl might not be her father at all. He thought he was a father, but doubt had just taken that away too. He thought the hardest part was loving her again, but the truth had a way of breaking hearts before healing them. Kerem couldn't sleep that night. The name Emir echoed like betrayal, not just from Hande, but from life itself. His own brother, the one he hadn't seen in a decade, the one who had once followed him like a shadow, and now might have fathered the same child. The next day, he demanded answers. Hande handed him a folder from the genetics lab. Kerem stared at the numbers, the markers, the similarities. So you don't know? He asked. She nodded. I don't. That's the truth. His heart burned, not because of doubt, but because of the possibility that Lara, the only light he'd begun to love without fear, might not carry his blood. But she carried something else. His laugh, his silences, his sadness. That night, Lara called him Dad again, softly, carefully, testing the word. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later, when Lara was asleep, Hande tried to speak. Kerem, it wasn't like that with Emir. I was broken. You were gone. I needed something to hold on to. He didn't answer. His silence was heavier than anger. Kerem spent the next morning walking through old places, their old apartment, the cafe where he used to dream, the bridge where he once told Hande he'd never leave her, and then he found something. A picture Lara as a baby, dated months after he'd been sent away. He could have known. He should have known. The truth wasn't just about DNA anymore. It was about the years they both lost, and the ones they might never get back. She called him Dad again, but the shadow of another man was already in the room. Sometimes, truth doesn't scream. It slips beneath closed doors, in voices never meant to be heard. The hospital was quiet at night. Too quiet for a girl whose heart beat with questions. Lara couldn't sleep. She hadn't been able to for days. Something felt off. In the air. In the way her mother whispered. In the way Kerem's hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. That night, she heard them. Kerem and Hande. Their voices came from just outside her room. Muffled but sharp. Kerem, I don't know if Lara is yours, or a me. Silence. Then the sound of heartbreak in her breath. What are you saying? A lot happened. I was lost. You weren't there. Emir. He was. Kerem didn't answer. Just the sound of a chair scraping the floor, and footsteps walking away. Lara stood frozen behind the slightly open door, hand over her mouth to stop the sob that nearly escaped. That night, she didn't sleep. She didn't cry. She simply drew lines, shapes, empty spaces, her way of making sense of a world that no longer made sense. The next day, Hande came into the room smiling, holding juice like nothing had happened. But Lara didn't look at her. She didn't look at Kerem when he came either. She didn't call anyone. Dad and Kerem didn't come back that evening. He couldn't. He sat at home, staring at a page in his old journal. One sentence scribbled again and again. Can a man love a child if he's no longer sure she's his? Meanwhile, Lara wrote a letter. Not to her mom, not to Kerem, to no one, to everyone. I don't want a father who wins a war. I just want someone who stays when I'm scared. Kerem found that letter, accidentally, and for the first time in years, he cried. She wrote a letter without a name, and no one knew if it was meant for them. The past doesn't always return with questions. Sometimes it comes back with answers no one was ready to hear. The hospital was holding its breath. Hande hadn't told Kerem yet, but Emir, the name she never wanted to say out loud, had called. And now he was here. A nurse tapped gently on the door. There's a man asking for Lara. He says his name is Emirhan. The color left Hande's face. Lara looked up. Who is he? Hande hesitated. Someone I once knew. Moments later, Emir entered Datal, composed, still wearing that cold elegance, the kind that once felt safe when the world had turned its back on her. But now, all that mattered was the way his eyes searched for Lara. Hello, Lara. I know you. No, but I knew your mother. When she needed someone. Han tried to explain, to control the story before it unraveled. But Emir didn't wait. I don't know if you're mine, but I wanted to be. Once Lara stared, not afraid, not angry, just tired. Later that day, Kerem arrived. He had no idea Emir had returned, but when he stepped into Lara's room, he saw him reading a story to the girl he had just begun to believe might be his daughter. Their eyes met, no handshake, no greeting, just a silence that said more than any fight ever could. Emir stood slowly. I only came to help. Help who? Kerem asked, voice sharp. Hand stood between them, again, not as a lover, not as a mother, but as someone tired of being broken by the same men in different ways. Lara sat quietly, then looked up. Which one of you is my father? No one answered, not because they didn't want to, but because, in that moment, neither of them knew. Blood may create life, but some answers can only come from the soul. A child's voice can heal wounds, but when she stops speaking, everything else begins to fall apart. Lara didn't speak the next day. Not a word, not to her mother, not to Kerem, not even to Emir. The doctors thought it might be emotional shock, a trauma response, but for Hande, it felt like punishment. She had spent years protecting Lara from the truth. Now that truth had robbed her of her daughter's voice. Kerem stood by Lara's bed with guilt in his eyes. Emir watched from a distance, not saying much. He knew this wasn't about who was right, only who was there. Lara just stared at the ceiling, blank, like she was somewhere else, like her heart had packed its things and left the room. Later that night, Kerem asked Hande, what do we do now? We wait. She doesn't have time for that, neither do you. Hande's words cut deeper than she meant. The next morning, the doctor returned with news. Lara's condition had worsened. She needed an emergency transplant in the next 12 hours. We need a compatible donor, the doctor said. Both men are potential matches, but we can't wait for legal proof. We need consent now. Silence. Kerem stood up. Take what you need from me. Emir took a step forward. What if she's not yours? Kerem didn't blink. She doesn't have to be mine. For me to love her. That moment said more than any DNA result could. Hande broke into tears. Because the only man who didn't hesitate was the one who had been pushed away the most. Inside the OR, as they prepped Kerem, Lara opened her eyes briefly. Dad. Kerem leaned in. I'm here. She held out her hand. He took it, didn't let go. Not even when the anesthesia pulled her under. She said Dad again. And that word gave him something science never could. Some truths arrived too late. Not because no one asked, but because love already answered first. The surgery was a success. Lara lived. She was still weak, but breathing on her own. Her small hand rested over the bandage on her chest, and next to her, Kerem sat in silence, his own body still recovering from what he had given. He hadn't asked for proof. He hadn't waited for a result. He had simply chosen love, and that was enough. But the envelope had arrived. The DNA test, still sealed, still waiting. Hande stared at it for hours before touching it. She didn't want the truth anymore. Not if it meant undoing everything Kerem had just proven. But eventually, curiosity whispered louder than fear. She opened it. One line, one truth. Kerem Demirhan, biological father of Lara Kaya, 99.9% match. Tears filled her eyes. Not because she was surprised, but because this time, love had gotten there before the paper did. Later that day, Kerem found her standing outside the hospital room. You opened it. Yes. So she smiled softly. It doesn't change anything. You already chose her. Kerem looked into the room. Lara was drawing again. Colors, figures, a house. 3 people. She smiled when she saw him. Come here, Dad. He walked in slowly, sat next to her, and took the drawing. It showed him Hande and Lara, holding hands, under a sun that filled the whole sky. On the bottom corner, she had written, My family. The truth finally arrived. But it only confirmed what his heart already knew. Love can save a life, but only forgiveness can teach you how to live it. Lara was home now. The hospital was behind them, but not the memories. She smiled more, slept better, called him Dad with warmth and certainty. But for Kerem, something still remained unfinished. He sat alone that night, staring at an old photo. His mother, Sima Hanim, the woman who had once told Hande to leave, the woman who had once buried his heart without asking. He hadn't spoken to her since the surgery, but now, he wanted to, not to accuse her, to release himself from the weight she left behind. So he went. She was at home, weaker now, surrounded by silence. She was holding a photo of her sons. Kerem didn't knock. He walked in. She looked up, didn't smile. You came. Not to fight. Then why? To forgive you. Because I want to breathe again. Her eyes filled. She didn't expect it. I tried to protect you, she whispered. No, you protected your pride. But I'm done carrying it. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But something between them loosened, like a door quietly unlocking after years of rust. That night, she passed away in her sleep, peacefully, quietly, without ever saying the words he most wanted to hear. But he had said his, and that made all the difference. The funeral was simple. Just Kerem, Hande, Amir, and Lara. No more accusations. Just silence. And acceptance later. Hande stood next to Kerem at the grave. I'm sorry you didn't hear what you needed. I heard it in her eyes. Lara, holding his hand, looked up. Will she still be watching us? Maybe, Kerem said. Then I hope she sees that I love you. And with that, Kerem finally let go of the pain. Some people never say sorry. But healing comes when we choose to stop waiting. Not all stories end in perfection. Some just need a heart willing to stay, even after the storm. Lara was healing. Not just her body, her heart, her eyes, her trust. She laughed more now, danced in the living room, called him Dad with a voice full of truth. Kerem stayed, not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as a father. He no longer needed proof. He had her smile. Hande watched from a distance, grateful, but scared, because peace often feels strange when you've lived so long in survival. That night, as the sky turned violet and gold, Kerem found her on the balcony. She didn't speak, but she didn't leave either. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. That's already something, she replied. He looked at her, really looked, not as the woman who left, but as the woman who stayed anyway, just from a different distance. If life gave us another chance, would you choose me again? She breathed in. I don't know. I've become someone I don't recognize. He smiled. Then maybe we can meet each other again as strangers. And start there. They didn't kiss. They didn't promise. They just sat together, in the quiet. In the possibility a year later, Lara brought him a drawing. 3 people, holding hands, a son, a house. And one sentence at the bottom. We chose each other again. Hande handed him a small key. It's not to my apartment. It's to the future I stopped being afraid of. And this time, they didn't need to say anything more. Some wounds never disappear, but they become the place where love decides to stay. The end, the wounds that became love, a story of silence, truth, and a love that refused to die.